Hello, everyone. We have another very special episode today of Lots of Thoughts, a sports podcast, part 2 of our NBA preview series for the 2023-2024 season with special guest Will Eckenfelder. This time we're doing the Western Conference. The Eastern Conference is already live, so go back and watch that if you haven't already. It was a fun episode. But just the same way we're ranking our 15 teams, how we think they're going to seed at the end of the year, some notes on each team, and kind of comparing where we're at the start of the season. So just before we get started with this episode, you can find us on Instagram at Lots of Thoughts Sports, on Twitter at LOT Sports Pod, on YouTube at Lots of Thoughts Sports. Subscribe if you're watching over there and click the like button as well. It really helps out the channel. If you're listening on an audio platform, rate us 5 stars, leave a review, follow us, or I should say subscribe to us on YouTube as well if you don't mind. I really appreciate all the support. You can visit our website, lotsofthoughts.godaddysites.com, to access all of this. The links are also in the description, but you can access the merchandise, the podcast, the newsletter, all the socials, lotsofthoughts.godaddysites.com. Like I said, all the links in the description. Without further ado, let's get into our Western Conference preview. Before we start the chunk of this episode, I do want to add a quick disclaimer. We recorded this before the Steven Adams news came out that he will be missing the full season with, I believe it was knee surgery. So we may have adjusted our rankings a little bit, knowing that the Grizzlies starting center and rebound monster was going to be out for the season. I do want to add that qualification. So just so you have a little bit of background before we get into the episode. But let's get into our Western Conference rankings with Will Eckenfelder. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of the Western Conference preview for the 2023-2024 NBA season with special guest William Eckenfelder. Will, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Appreciate being here.
If you haven't listened already or watched on YouTube, it is already live, the Eastern Conference preview. We did 15 through 1. There were some surprises, some big differences, so go back and give that a watch if you haven't already. So we're going to go through 15 to 1 just the same way. Talk about where the team is at the end of the offseason and some of our thoughts on the team. We both made predictions of each team and where we thought they'd be at the end of the season. So starting with number 15, I had the Portland Trailblazers.
I also have the Portland Trailblazers.
I think they were not a great team already, and they significantly downgraded in talent. Although they did add DeAndre Ayton, Malcolm Brogdon. They drafted Scoot Henderson, added Robert Williams as well. They re-signed Jeremy Grant and re-signed Matisse Thybulle. They obviously lost Damian Lillard. They lost Nasir Little, Yusuf Nurkic, Cam Reddish. For them, I think obviously it's a completely different look this year. I think the things that could significantly improve how they end up is whether DeAndre Ayton actually can show the potential that he was believed to have with the first overall pick. And then on top of that, how much of their team they flip halfway through the season for more picks. I mean, they have Jeremy Grant, Matisse Thybulle, I mentioned. Brogdon is obviously going to get moved, I assume. And so I think that's going to really determine how well they do in terms of the standings.
Yeah, I think that they have a positive future. They do have a young core that, given a few seasons, could be very impressive. But that's just the thing. I mean, it's too young right now, and I don't think Ayton is going to bring enough. Just seeing his years in Phoenix, like it's not as pretty as we all thought he would be. So I don't know. I just can't see them really getting above 3 or 13 in this season. Like they will be bottom, and they probably will be looking for more draft picks.
100% agree. And I think as much as the team lacks a lot of talent, I think it's really interesting that they have a guy like Robert Williams off the bench. And I feel like he's a starting caliber center in the NBA right now.
I agree.
And they're not going to start him alongside, at least I hope from a basketball perspective, they're not going to start him alongside DeAndre Ayton. So how long does that go on with him coming off the bench for a guy who hasn't? I mean, he was drafted first overall ahead of Luka Doncic and Trae Young and Jaren Jackson. And so I don't know.
I don't know.
Number 14, I had the Utah Jazz.
Okay, I have Houston.
Okay. Who do you have at
13? I have the Jazz.
Okay, so I just have them switched. I have the Rockets 13, the Jazz 14.
Okay.
Let's start with the Jazz here. They obviously acquired John Collins. They re-signed Jordan Clarkson on a player option. They lost Juan Toscano Anderson, not really big names all the way through. Rudy Gay was also in a bunch of deals. I think for them, it comes into, I think they have a solid front court between John Collins and Larry Markkinen, and Walker Kessler's really shown to be an NBA quality player in his first year in the league. I think the guard play is really what I'm more interested in seeing the production out of. You have Jordan Clarkson, Colin Sexton, THT. They drafted Keontae George, who I didn't mention. I'm curious who's going to be the guy to take the reins and distribute the ball and score in the guards, if it's going to be Jordan Clarkson again, or if they're going to have someone else step up.
I see. I think I could be wrong, but I feel like the Jazz is looking for the lottery this year. And I think that they only signed Clarkson on a player option just to probably just to slight Markkinen, because I think Markkinen sees himself now as that super caliber player. And if they lost Clarkson, I think Markkinen probably would have been pretty unhappy being kind of the only scoring option on their team, basically at that point. So yeah, I think getting is Keontae George. That's who they drafted.
Yeah, 19th overall. 16th overall. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think he looks pretty okay. And like you said, with Walker Kessler, I think that they have potential to develop, but I just don't see like a lot of scoring potential on this team almost at all.
Yeah, and it's almost, I thought last year was going to be a situation where they were going to have an option to move on from Lauri Markkinen and kind of take advantage of the rise he was taking and hope he wouldn't have fallen off before that point. And maybe he is taking a legit step up, and I think that's what he proved throughout the rest of the season. So, that obviously wouldn't have been smart to trade him when he could, show that value all the way through. But if he's a piece to build around, I think they need to do a better job of keeping him happy.
Definitely.
If he's a piece they're going to move on from, I think that has to happen this season, probably.
I agree.
Okay, and then the Rockets, since we had them interchanged in that other spot there.
Yep.
They signed Dylan Brooks, signed Reggie Bullock, Jeff Green, brought in Fred VanVleet, drafted Amen Thompson 4th overall, drafted Cam Whitmore 20th overall. And then they lost KJ Martin. They lost Josh Christopher, DJ Augustine, not really huge losses in my opinion. For them, I think I don't, as much as I like adding veteran pieces to a young team, I don't know that Dylan Brooks was the guy to add there. No. I somewhat like Fred VanVleet to be a guy that can, kind of be the veteran presence for Jalen Green. And I think he's a good culture fit, especially with Ime Udoka kind of turning over that whole culture from Steven Silas. But I just don't know how much that Dylan Brooks signing really helps the situation. And I think it almost could limit the development of some of their younger players.
I agree. I could definitely see him hurting the development. And I think, I don't know, Fred VanVleet didn't have a very good year last year. And if he stays in that slump, I just don't really see how this team can do much. I mean, once they got Scoot Henderson, who I think will be a really good player, and given a few years, he could definitely be the face of Houston.
You mean Amen Thompson?
Amen Thompson. Yeah, my bad. Amen Thompson. I think him and his brother both have shown, both in the preseason game and in the
summer league.
Yeah, the summer league. I think they both showed a lot of potential, and I think that they could be amazing. Cam Whitmore also looked insane. I think he's an absolute steal in the draft. So I think they have potential, like just like Portland, could take a few years, but I don't think Dylan Brooks and Fred VanVleet are going to really elevate this team in any way.
Yeah, I 100%. And I think Amen Thompson, I think, is a good pairing with Jalen Green in some capacity, because I feel like Jalen Green while he was drafted to be the number one, he's clearly not that. And I think he could ascend to kind of the number two in their young core if Amen Thompson could take the reins there.
Mhm.
And Cam Whitmore being drafted, I remember he was drafted 20th overall, and the Nets had like the next two picks, and I was just watching him slide, hoping he made it to the Nets pick, and then he got drafted right before. I was so devastated. So
Yeah,
I'm always gonna have a soft spot for watching him. I think, like you said, he could have a big impact for them.
definitely.
Um, all right, number 12. I had the San Antonio Spurs.
I also have the Spurs.
Obviously, they drafted Victor Wembanyama first overall. They also acquired Chetty Osman. That's pretty much it for the additions in terms of the big names. They re-signed they extended Devin Vassell. They re-signed Trey Jones. They lost Keita Beats Diop. No otherwise really no other big names. I think for them, it's for me, someone who's watched Wembanyama in his French games in this past season, it's just watching the freak talent that he is in
Yeah.
San Antonio and how Pop
Yeah.
can utilize him.
Yeah, I think look, I'm going to be honest, I wouldn't be surprised if the Spurs are playing for a play-in spot by the end of the season. I could see it if Victor Wembanyama is everything and maybe even more. He could elevate this team to a whole nother level that makes them fighting for play-in. I think Devin Vassell is going to come into form even more this year. Last year, being Spurs fan, I really saw him show signs of being a really high caliber, almost all-star player. And I think if he keeps on heading in that direction, he could be a huge scoring facilitator for the Spurs. So I have him low, but I also wouldn't be surprised if they find their way up.
Yeah, I agree. I sat there when I was first making this list, and I didn't initially go in order. I just kind of had ideas in my head, and I thought, you know what? I think I could see the Spurs taking the 10th seed. And then I went through the teams and was like, okay, maybe I can. Maybe I can sneak them in. But yeah, I feel like their young core is somewhat underrated all the way through. I mean, Keldon Johnson has shown he could be a very solid NBA player. Jeremy Sohan had flashes.
Yes.
Trey Jones, I talked about him being re-signed, but I think he was an underrated player last year. Chetty Osman, I think, is a good veteran presence for them. But yeah, it's all about Wemby, in my opinion. His defensive impact is just elite already alone.
I think they were the lowest defensive rated team in the league last year, and I think that is going to significantly change with this guy this year.
100% agree. You just see in the preseason games, he'll be in the key, and guys are afraid to take a 3-point shot. It's insane.
It's so cool.
All right. Number 11, I had the Minnesota Timberwolves just missing out on the plan.
Okay, I have Sacramento actually.
Okay, I don't have the Sacramento Kings far from. Oh, it's them 7. How far up did you have the Timberwolves?
So I have Minnesota at 7 actually.
Oh, we just switched them. Okay, we'll talk about these two then. So let's start with Minnesota. They added Shake Milton, not a whole lot of other big name additions here. They re-signed Nickeil Alexander-Walker. They extended Anthony Edwards, which is probably the number one move they made this offseason. They also extended Naz Reid, which I think was underrated. And they lost out on Taurean Prince, who went to the Lakers. Austin Rivers is still a free agent. Jalen Noel went to the Kings, and Nathan Knight as well. For them, I last year was very high on them. But at the end of the day, I'm not convinced after seeing it in somewhat limited minutes that the two big lineup is going to work. And I think if it works, they could be a very good team.
Yeah.
If it doesn't, I think they're going to end up having to make some moves in the middle of the season.
Yeah. I just want to start this off by saying at this point, this is not even fighting for play-ins. At this point, I feel like most of the West is like pretty up in the air. I think this is extremely competitive. I think even these bottom teams, Houston, the Jazz, the Spurs, are all even going to be very competitive and make some of these other teams really fight. But yeah, so Minnesota, I think Anthony Edwards is just going to continue to improve. But I also have in my notes, like you said, there's still a lot to prove. especially between the two bigs that they really opted for. And I personally think that if they miss out on play-ins or get knocked out of the play-ins, I definitely think there's going to be some huge switches. I've heard that Karl Anthony Towns kind of is looking at the Knicks. So I think if this year doesn't go well for them, there'll be some significant changes. But like you said, I think with these two big men, if they can pull it off, I think this team will be an absolute force in the West.
I agree. I think especially with them, with Jaden McDaniels, who's kind of developed into a guy that you could comfortably start at power forward, but now he's starting at small forward. You kind of have a bit of an issue with lineup construction overall.
Mm-hmm.
A little bit bigger than you'd like to be, although Jaden McDaniels can guard down a position.
Yeah.
But with, like you mentioned, I think if they do move on from one of the two, it's going to be Karl Anthony Towns because he's going to have the value in a trade back, whereas Rudy Gobert is going to have very little, and especially a year or no, I guess 2 years after trading for Rudy Gobert for how many picks, they're not going to be able to save face by moving on from him after this year.
Yeah.
So I think Towns is the guy if they do. All right. And then since you had the Kings at 11, let's go through them.
Okay.
They traded for Chris Duarte, signed JaVale McGee, Jalen Noel. They drafted Sasha, I always butcher his name, Vezenkov from Barcelona. They re-signed Harrison Barnes, Alex Len, Trey Lyles, and renegotiated, but extended Domantas Sabonis. They lost not a lot of huge names. Rashawn Holmes, I guess, is the biggest name here. Overall, with the Kings, I think I feel like they're going to regress, and obviously, you think they're going to regress more than me. They can't. They got career years out of pretty much everyone on their team last year, and I think even if a guy like Keegan Murray takes a step, I think a lot of guys are going to have to take a step back. And so I think they're going to drop in some capacity.
Yeah, I agree. My biggest thing for Sacramento is just their defense. You saw it in the playoffs. They just don't have the kind of defense that you want to see a playoff team have. Even though they took Golden State to 5 games or 7 games, I need to see more out of them. I think that most of their players have peaked. I don't think that there's going to be much more development. Maybe you can make the argument that De'Aaron Fox can go a little farther. But I think that's a tough argument to make. So I think their whole seeding this year depends on their defense.
I agree. I think, like you mentioned, the defense is going to be the focus. I mean, the defense was all right last year for the most of the regular season, but a team like Golden State, who, I mean, obviously Steph Curry is a crazy offensive weapon, right? Klay Thompson, they had pieces, but they weren't the Golden State of the dynasty years last year.
No.
And they really just made Sacramento's defense look like mush throughout that whole series.
Yep.
All right. So that was our 11. Who did you have at number 10?
Dallas.
Okay, so I didn't have them far away. I had them at 8.
Okay.
I had the Pelicans at number 10.
Okay.
Where did you
I
have
Pelicans at 8. So it's
just okay. We just swap those too.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's start with yours, which was the Dallas Mavericks. They were one of the hardest teams for me to rank, just because they have a couple of really talented names and a really weird fit. But nonetheless, they signed Seth Curry, brought him back after a few years away. They got Rashawn Holmes in a trade. Derek Jones they signed in free agency. They drafted Derek Lively II, and did a sign and trade with Grant Williams. They re-signed Kyrie Irving and Dwight Powell. And then they lost JaVale McGee, Reggie Bullock, Davis Bertans, not that he contributed much, Christian Wood. For them, I think the key, it's similar to the Kings, I guess, is what is their defense going to be? Because Kyrie's an elite offensive player, Luke is an elite offensive player. They're both suspect defensively, and they sacrificed a lot of defense trading for Kyrie Irving last year. Dorian Finney-Smith and Spencer Dinwiddie were both above average to very good defensively, and I think we're
Yep.
good fits alongside Luka. So that's, even though the offense I think has a potential to be elite, I
Yep.
think the defense has to be around middle of the pack in the league to be able to make a solid playoff push, and I don't know if it'll be there.
Yeah, that was basically my biggest thing is where's their defense again? I think Grant Williams can add a little bit, but he definitely does not fill the void of the two players that you just named. And I still feel like I've yet to see the full potential of Luka and Kyrie offensively. And I think if they can be everything that people want them to be, maybe their defense can be a little bit lacking if they have that kind of volume of scoring. But I haven't seen it yet.
Yeah, and for Kyrie, he's got to stay on the court for that to happen, and that doesn't happen very often through his own volition.
Yep.
And also from injuries, obviously, over the past 2 seasons. But
Absolutely.
all right, and then the other team that we had in these spots, the Pelicans.
Yep.
Let's see here. So the Pelicans this off season, not a lot of crazy moves. They signed Cody Zeller. Signed a few undrafted free agents, drafted Jordan Hawkins 14th overall, re-signed Herb Jones. They did lose Josh Richardson, Jackson Hayes, Garrett Temple, not huge players here. For them, I think the key is whether Zion and Brandon Ingram can stay healthy. I think the roster is very strong. I think backup center is a little weak. I mean, behind Jonas Valanciunas is basically Cody Zeller or Larry Nance, and maybe Larry Nance is the guy for small ball lineups. But if Zion and Brandon Ingram could stay healthy, I could see them really being very high on this ranking.
I agree.
But if Zion misses any time, if Brandon Ingram misses any time, I think they'll be in the play-in.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, Zion has a lot to prove for me. I think him playing an average, I think it was 24 games over his career so far, is ridiculous. So he's got a lot to prove. And I think both of them have potential to be all-stars if, like you said, they can stay on the court. And I also had in my notes, same thing, the center. Jonas Valanciunas is already, he's not like a superstar level center, but he gives them everything that they need. And then behind that, I don't really know. So those are my worries, but I think that they do have a lot of star potential, and their roster is a very good looking roster.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. I agree. I think if we've seen from Zion, if he's healthy and in shape, he is a almost guaranteed all-star level player. But
absolutely,
that obviously hasn't happened barely at all in his career. So I 100% agree. All right. So we got our 7, 8, 10, and 11 out of the way. Number 9, I had the Oklahoma City Thunder.
Okay, I have Golden State.
Okay, interesting. Where did you have the Thunder?
I have OKC at 4.
Oh wow. Okay, a big jump for them.
Yeah.
I had the Warriors at 5, so not too far off there.
Okay.
Let's start with the Thunder, and then we'll bounce over to the Warriors here.
Okay.
So the Thunder, they acquired Davis Bertans. I don't think he'll make a lot of noise in their rotation. They drafted Cason Wallace, number 10. They lost Jeremiah Robinson Earl. Oops, that's my phone alarm going off. Excuse me, podcast listeners. Lost Jeremiah Robinson Earl, lost Dario Saric. I don't think those are big losses necessarily. I don't hate your take because I think they're going to be significantly better. I just think this West is so tough, and a lot of these teams are going to be very good, and so I couldn't really force them much higher than 8 or 9, and so I had them at 9. I think the key for them is how good Chet can be, and I think he showed flashes in the preseason. I think I don't want to say you know what you have, but you know you have a very good young core, right? And Shea and Giddey and Jalen Williams and other pieces, Lou Dort and Kenrich Williams and the other Jalen Williams. But if Chet can be, a really good big man coming into the league, I think that their potential is sky high, especially with all the assets they have to trade throughout the season.
Absolutely. I think them almost making play-ins. Oh no, did they make play-ins last season? They did. They got knocked out.
They did. They got bounced.
Yeah. I think that little bit of experience will be huge. I've also already seen just in a few clips and things that their team chemistry looks very, very nice. It looks like a brotherhood over there. And I think that alone is a huge asset for them as a team. Not only do they have some upcoming stars, um, they also have great team chemistry, and I think that'll be a huge asset to them. And like you said, I think if Chet can show some semblance of an NBA player, even just as a rim protector, I think because they have enough scoring with who they have. I think if Chet can even just be a rim protector, I think they'll be an elite team this season.
I was selfishly, just for the chaos of it, wanting them to get the first overall pick to get Wemby, just because that, like, you can just imagine them playing Wemby at 4 and having a lineup of including Giddy and Dort and Wemby and Chet. That defense would be
It'd be insane.
insane.
It'd be so insane.
I just looked it up. I'm sorry, I was wrong. They won the first game in the play-in
Oh,
against
okay.
New Orleans, and then lost to Minnesota. So even more playoff experience.
There you go. I like that.
Um, it's going to be interesting for me if they could show that talent early on. They have so many picks. I wrote it down here: 18 picks in the next 3 drafts, 34 picks in the next 7 drafts.
Oh my gosh.
So when you think they could trade 27 of those picks and still have league average amount, so
Yeah.
the ability to go in and maybe it's not for a star player, maybe it's for just complementary pieces to their young core, veteran
Yeah.
guys. I think that could be a potential for huge improvement mid-season.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we covered our 7 and 8 teams. Oh, I'm sorry, we're going to go over the Warriors since you
Yeah.
had the Warriors at 9th.
Yep.
And let me pull them up here. The Warriors were one of the hardest teams to rank, in my opinion, just because they added Chris Paul, and I don't love the fit there. They did re-sign Draymond Green. They lost Dante DiVincenzo. Andre Iguodala retired. And then obviously they traded Jordan Poole in the Chris Paul deal. For them, the whole Chris Paul acquisition, I always thought was a means to an end that wasn't Chris Paul. And after the Dame trade happened and Drew Holiday was in Portland, to me it seemed like that was going to be the answer. They were going to trade for Drew Holiday. They were going to start him at shooting guard. Clay could move up to small forward, where I think he's probably better suited defensively now after his injuries. And you'd have a guy who could hit threes, take some of the ball handling away and play defense. But they're rolling with Chris Paul in some capacity, and they want to force him into the starting lineup. And I don't necessarily love it, but I think I still believe in the top end talent, which is why I have them at 5.
Yeah. Yeah. They were probably the hardest team for me as well, just because of that. I really don't like CP3 on their team. I just don't think he fits really at all. And some of the rumor is that Steph's going to be moving to shooting guard, which I don't know about that. That doesn't sound good to me at all. I think losing Poole, honestly, even though he didn't really gel with the team, you saw some chemistry issues. I think that's huge points off of just their overall scoring, that CP3 can't fill that void. So the only reason why I have them even at 9, I honestly kind of wanted to put them lower, is just because of the history and because they have Curry. And when you have Curry on your team, there's always potential for you to make playoffs and even go far in the playoffs just because you have Curry. So that's Curry, and their core 3 is basically the only reason why I even had them at 9.
I could 100% see a regression. I don't hate the take. I feel in some capacity they, even like from an outside perspective, if I'm looking at just purely this season, would I rather have Jordan Poole or Chris Paul? I think it's close, but I'd rather have Jordan Poole. And considering they had Jordan Poole locked up for longer, I think the only reason they made that trade was so they could retain Clay next season when he's a free agent, and Draymond Green in this offseason. And I don't love sacrificing pieces now and for the next few years in the name of keeping a guy who's, even though he's a legendary player. Well, both of them are legendary players for them.
Yep.
They're not talent they once were, and they're probably going to be overpaid on their next contract, when I think you still have a few more years to get another playoff run or two with Steph.
I agree. I completely agree.
I do think it'll be fun to see Chris Paul if he does end up on the bench unit, which it doesn't sound like they're going to do, like you mentioned. I do think he could get the best out of guys like Jonathan Kuminga,
Absolutely.
but I don't know that he's going to get much more than that for them.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Okay, so we covered the Warriors. Who did you have at number 6?
Clippers.
Okay, the Clippers, I had them at 4, so not far away on that one.
Mm-hmm.
So the Clippers, not a lot of crazy moves they made this offseason. They brought in KJ Martin, but Josh Primo, I guess that's another name. They brought back Russell Westbrook. They obviously are in the rumors of James Harden throughout the whole offseason. They brought back Mason Plumlee as well, and they lost Eric Gordon. I think obviously if James Harden ends up on the Clippers and they don't give up huge pieces, my feeling about them is they're right there, one of the top teams in the Western Conference. To have James Harden, even if he's a diminished James Harden, as your third option, I think is great. But as they are right now, I think they could still make a playoff run if Paul George and Kawhi can stay healthy and play through most of the regular season. And I don't know that they're going to do that.
Yeah, that is always the narrative around the Clippers. Can Paul George and Kawhi stay healthy? And I think with some of the new rules that the league brought in, it's more likely that they'll stay more healthy. And honestly, I think Westbrook is going to have almost like a breakout year for himself. I think there's going to be like a rebirth for him. He seems so happy where he is in the Clippers. And he kind of developed this kind of defensive role in the playoffs we saw. And I'd love to see that develop more, because if you already have PG and Kawhi, having this defensive sixth man being Westbrook would be so just advantageous to their whole team, I feel like.
100%. And if they do make that trade for James Harden, I think it almost makes his defense, Russell Westbrook's defense, more of an impact, because Harden is not what he was defensively a few years ago, and even then he was not good defensively.
Yeah.
So 100%, I agree. I think Russell Westbrook was, although he's not what he was when he was, an elite, triple double every night kind of guy, but he's still a very good NBA player, and he was put in an absolutely awful position with the Lakers, in my opinion.
Absolutely.
And like you mentioned, he's so much happier with the Clippers, and I think that goes a long way for him to having a more impactful or more of an impact on the team.
Without a doubt.
All right. So that was your number 6. Let's go to my number 6 was the Memphis Grizzlies. Where did you have them?
I have Memphis at 3.
Oh wow. Okay, so you're high on Memphis here.
I'm high on Memphis.
Let's see. Memphis this offseason, they signed Derrick Rose, traded for Marcus Smart. That was kind of the big addition for them. They did extend Desmond Bane. They lost Dylan Brooks to Houston, and they lost Tyus Jones to Washington. For them, I could see them playing better if Desmond Bane takes a step up. And given that Ja is going to be suspended for the first 25 games, something like that, at the beginning of the season, and bringing in a guy like Marcus Smart to take that offensive role, that guy who can, facilitate and get the offense going, I think they have the potential to be higher. The only limiting factor I worry about is with Dylan Brooks gone, who's the wing for them? Who's the small forward that's going to be guarding the LeBron, the KD? So that's the only reason I couldn't put them any higher, but I still believe in them as a playoff contender.
Okay, yeah. Look, I think Marcus Smart is huge for them. I think that they're going to be probably top 2, top 3 defensive team in the West, just with that addition with Jared Jackson Jr. To your point, I do think having no real wing defender is going to be a hindrance if they can't figure that out. And I also want to see more out of Jaren Jackson Jr. He is an incredible defender, but offensively, I feel like I want to see more out of him. And I think getting Derrick Rose just as a vet on their team, and a very humble one. He's a very humble guy. I think will be huge for their overall culture.
Agreed. And especially for a guy like Ja, who's had obviously issues with various conduct and such. I think having that guy who's been through a lot of crap, not only in his, growing up in the storied, history of his personal life, but also on an NBA level, right? And going through the highs and lows of his career. I think that'll definitely help. I could see them given their whole at the wing defender spot. I could see them, being a player at the trade deadline or even the buyout market for a guy that is just the whoever they face, the LeBron stopper, the KD stopper, to just hound him like a PJ Tucker kind of guy. I'm not saying it would be PJ Tucker, but that kind of role.
I could see that for sure.
All right. Number 5, I had the Warriors. Who'd you have at number 5?
Number 5, I have the Lakers.
The Lakers. Okay, so I had them at 3. So we're right around the same range here.
Yeah.
So we already covered the Warriors. Let's go to the Lakers. Lakers made quite a few moves. They signed Jackson Hayes. They drafted Jalen Hood-Schifino. They signed Taurean Prince, signed Cam Reddish, signed Gabe Vincent, signed Christian Wood. They extended Anthony Davis, re-signed Rui Hachimura, re-signed Austin Reeves, re-signed D'Angelo Russell, re-signed Jared Vanderbilt. They did let Dennis Schroeder go. They let Wenyen Gabriel go, Malik Beasley. Lonnie Walker, I guess, is also a notable loss for them, especially with his role in the playoffs. For them, I think they have the potential to be one of those top teams if Anthony Davis is the best player on the team. And if he is a guy who's barely there, they're going to be fighting for a play-in spot. And if he's the second guy, they're going to be maybe 6, 7. And I think that's going to be the number one key for them.
I absolutely agree. I have in my notes, it's basically around Anthony Davis. Can he stay healthy? Can he be the beast that we've seen him be? Like he was in New Orleans. And even in their championship, I mean, he was a unit.
Right.
So if we can see that Anthony Davis, I think that they'll be insane. I'm going to bring this up one more time. I think Reeves coming off of FIBA will be huge for him. And I've heard D'Angelo Russell really working on his defense. I think if he can work on his defense and he said he wants to become more of like a Derek White. I think if he can do that, their team can reach a whole nother level. And I like the addition of Gabe Vincent. I think maybe doesn't completely fill a void of like a Dennis Schroeder, but brings another volume of shooting that I personally think was kind of needed. It kind of felt like Austin Reeves was mostly their only option for deep volume shooting. And now they have another guy, and I think that's going to be a huge asset as well.
100%. You could see they prioritize that, bringing in Taurean Prince, who's also a good shooter. Bringing back Jared Vanderbilt and Rui Hachimura, I think, really helps that. I think I'm glad you brought up the D'Lo quote, because I think that's exactly what the Lakers and Lakers fans want to hear from him. Not that he's going to be that really good defender and the complete grit and grind, because that's not who he is in his career, but just a little bit more of that, doing the things that the team needs, I don't want to say the dirty work, but the things no one wants to do, right?
Yeah.
Being the guy who maybe takes a backseat to someone who's hot, like if it's Austin Reeves or whoever that may be. There's a lot of talk about the 5th starter for them, alongside Anthony Davis, LeBron, and obviously D'Lo and Austin Reeves. To me, I don't think that's really too important. I think it's more interesting on who closes with them, because I think they're going to, like you mentioned, want to have more 3-point shooting around those guys.
Yeah, definitely. I could see Rui Hachimura being that guy too. I think I heard that he spent almost the entire offseason training with LeBron, and I think that'll just be huge for his development. I could see him just being a great maybe 4 or 3 man for them.
100%. Okay, so we just have 2 and 1 then left. So for number 2, I had the Denver Nuggets.
Okay, I have Denver at 1. and I have Phoenix at 2.
Okay. And I debated back and forth about these two because to me it's whether the Nuggets take the regular season seriously. Like I think they're
Okay.
going to be there. They're going to be off a championship, and I think they do have some questions. Let me go to their off-season moves. They signed Justin Holiday. Other than that, not really a whole lot. They re-signed Reggie Jackson. They did lose Bruce Brown and Jeff Green. Those are the two big pieces, along with Thomas Bryant and Ish Smith.
Mm-hmm.
For them, like I mentioned, I think if they take it seriously, if they can stay healthy, they're going to be the first seed. Even though they lost Bruce Brown, I think Christian Brown could fill that role. I think they have a lot of guys that can step into that role. KCP, I think, even has a potential to improve on what he did last year. And so I think the number one thing for them is just health. If Jamal Murray and Michael Porter Jr. and obviously Jokic, but I don't think he has that big of a concern, can stay healthy, they're going to be one of the best teams in the NBA.
Yeah, I mean, basically the only reason why I had them 1 over 2 is because they're defending champs. Still, just the Jokic Murray pick and roll is ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
I think Aaron Gordon is still showing signs of improvement, even.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, I don't really see much leeway between 1 and 2 for them. They're gonna be 1 or 2 in this season.
100%. And I think Aaron Gordon kind of likens back to what we were talking about with D'Angelo Russell in some capacity. Like Aaron Gordon was a very high overall pick that found a team where he's not the first or second or even the third option,
Mm-hmm.
but he does all the little things and he makes his shots when he has them. And I think that's exactly what D'Lo in some capacity needs to be for the Lakers. Very early pick, but he's not one of the. I think he's probably the 4th option realistically, maybe in the 5th behind Rui and Austin Reeves. And he's just got to fill those gaps, I think, like Aaron Gordon does for the Nuggets.
Absolutely.
All right, and so then lastly, the Phoenix Suns. This is also a sizable list here. They traded for Grayson Allen, obviously traded for Bradley Beal, signed Keita Bates-Diop, signed Bol, signed Eric Gordon, traded for Nasir Little, traded for Yusuf Nurkic, signed Yuta Watanabe, re-signed Damian Lee and Josh Okogie. They did lose DeAndre Ayton, Darius Baisley, Torrey Craig, Chris Paul, Cam Payne, Landry Shamet, and TJ Warren, although he didn't have a huge impact for them. I think for them, they're going to be one of the more fun teams to watch. I don't know what the ceiling is of their big three, but I think it's definitely very high. And if the pieces, the depth around them can provide what they need, that defensive mindset, that ability to take advantage of the elite spacing they're going to have, I think you're going to see guys like Yusuf Nurkic really be able to get easy buckets on the inside because of that. And if guys like Yuta Watanabe, Eric Gordon, Damian Lee, Josh Okogie can make shots, I think they'll be, one of the top teams in the West.
Absolutely. I almost see like no holes in this team. I think their bench is solid. Obviously their big three is ridiculous. The only question with their big three would just be defense. All those guys are not really known for being super defensive players. But even still, with their volume of scoring that they're going to have, I doubt it's going to be a big deal. I mean, just as we were reading off the list of their additions and their subtractions, I mean, it just sounded like wins all around. They're just taking all the wins from every team, it sounds like, and they are going to be an absolute force this whole season, I feel like.
100%. And I compared this in my head to when the Nets acquired James Harden, and both teams kind of had 2 stars and they added a third one. And the Nets did it right early into the season. So outside of buyouts, guys like Blake Griffin and LaMarcus Aldridge, they couldn't make huge additions to the depth behind those 3. So when they went down, it was really a struggle. But with the Suns, they did this move in the offseason, and I thought in my head, okay, let's see what their depth looks like. But they've really done a great job of establishing the depth through and through for a roster that's so top
filled out. Yeah. I think Yuta Watanabe is a huge addition just for some more shooting off the bench. I think Bol training I saw him training with KD a lot, and I think that that'll be huge for his development, and he'll be great coming off the bench for them. They also didn't they get who'd they get from the Clippers again?
Oh, Eric Gordon.
Eric Gordon. I think Eric Gordon will be great for their bench defensively.
Mm-hmm.
So I just think their whole team is very well rounded.
100% agree. I think Eric Gordon's one of the more underrated moves I think they've made, just because he's a defensive guy. He's a guy that'll make shots when he's asked to, and I think he didn't have the best role with the Clippers after being traded over there. So, and really with the Rockets, that was he should have been out of there a long time before he was. So I think he'll have a significant role with the Suns.
I agree. Absolutely.
All right. So we're going to go down 1 through 15 again, just to recount our lists.
Okay.
I had the Suns first, followed by the Nuggets, the Lakers third, Clippers fourth, Warriors fifth, Grizzlies sixth. And then in the play-in, I had the Kings, the Mavericks, the Thunder, and the Pelicans. And then just outside of the play-in, I had the Timberwolves, followed by the Spurs, the Rockets, the Jazz, and then the Trailblazers at 15.
Okay. Yeah, once again, I want to reiterate that this Western Conference my list could be very off, just because I feel all teams have the potential to be amazing.
100%.
So at 1, I have Denver. 2, I have Phoenix. 3, I have the Grizzlies. 4, OKC. 5, Lakers. 6, Clippers. 7, Minnesota. 8, Pelicans. 9, Golden State. 10, Dallas. And then just outside of play-ins, I have Sacramento at 11, Spurs at 12, Jazz at 13, Houston at 14, and Portland at the very bottom.
Awesome. I think it's funny, both in the Eastern Conference. I'm not going to spoil it in case you haven't listened. Go back and listen to the Eastern Conference version. But in the Eastern Conference, we had a team that you were a lot higher on that I wasn't high on. And then in the West, we had that again with who was it? The Oklahoma
Minnesota?
City Thunder.
Oh yeah, OKC. Yeah.
So it's a very similar parallel. That's interesting. Well, this was a lot of fun. I really appreciate you coming on, Will.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. Thanks for joining me. And thank you, everyone, for listening. That'll do it for this episode of Lots of Thoughts, a sports podcast. Thank you for watching or listening to this Western Conference preview. Like I said, if you haven't already watched the Eastern Conference or listened to the Eastern Conference episode, I encourage you to go back and do that. We had a lot of fun recording both of these, and thank you to special guest Will Eckenfelder for joining the show today. I think it was a good time. If you aren't already following at Lots of Thoughts Sports on most platforms, including YouTube, click subscribe, click the like button, rate us 5 stars on the audio platform, tell your friends, leave a review. Thanks for the support. I really appreciate it all, and have a wonderful rest of your day.